Yeah.
Take this hat.
Okay. So 16 of y'all.
Or wrestle. Wrestle. No, wrestle is your right.
Take 16.
Yeah, it's
So the last time we used just multiply.
which method are we using for?
Traditional, all traditional. Here,
Food. So that did not hurt the animals. So this shows that our ancestors were very much loving towards the animals. Even the other foods also. See, in olden days, most of the things were made of food. Then came the matter and the plastic and all. So you'll see all these things before the existence of electricity. Then you have this fountain and this found in your nose to make your beaten rice and for deconstructing your pen. Then another form of powders here for the lard. Wherein 3 or 2 people used to work on this. One would go over pressing like this. Other one is to put grains in there and one is to remove it to make the beaten rice, poha or the flattened rice. And same method on this to make powder of chilies, turmeric, spices. If you see that has a matter what juice was put in that jaggery pan. That is where you hit or boil the juice and get jaggery out. Then here the grandfather have the telephone now we have mobiles. So the telephone.
That bowl and one is to remove the flattened rice. This is also a lard to make the powder of the spices. Oil meal, coconut oil meal. Bullocks were tied at the end with the yoke. Then they used to put coconut pieces in this hole. As the bullocks go round, it gets crushed. And oil was collected in this hole. A thresher, crossbar. To threshen the grain by stamping it. Just to lean on this and just to go on stamping. Just to separate the grain. Head wheel to remove the husk of the grain.
if rice cultivation is there. Besides that, I have identified 13 different types of soil on which we cultivate. Okay, all your Borod, Morod, Kuski, Kher, Azan, Kantor, whatever that land that we talk about, the character differs. The single piece plough that was used on laterite soil, and the metal plough which was introduced with 5 kiloscales. Okay. Same way, talking about operations and talking why museums like this are very important is because of breaking of myths. Okay, we say that a banyan tree is a religion.
Mark Silva from Portugal and Malacca.
I'm Vishal from Fiji and I'm working for GFM.
Mr. Nilesh Cabral, Chairman GTDC, I welcome you, sir. And to express our gratitude, I request Victor Hugo, Curator of Goa Chitra, to present a small floral tribute. It's a pleasure and honor for us at Goa Chitra to be chosen as the ideal place for the diaspora youth to get to know the rich Goan indigenous culture and heritage. I know many of you must be overwhelmed after taking this guided tour and in a sense, having gone on a small journey into your own ancestry. Since its conception in 2008, one of the aims of Goa Chitra is that the implements and tools creates an awareness and appreciation of past traditions, allowing future generations like y'all to become aware of their roots and take pride in their rich ancestry. We've had over 50,000 people, not only locally but globally, that is scientists, teachers, businessmen, students, housewives, who have come and have had their hearts strings tugged on. Goa Chitra represents a universal loss, and we are proud to be able to save and portray an authentic ethnographic depiction of a society. We are grateful and thankful to Mr. U.D. Kamath, Director for NRI Affairs, Goa, who has recognized this mission and has always been supporting our cause wholeheartedly. We welcome you, sir, and to express our gratitude, I request Om Prakash to present a floral tribute to Mr. Kamath. Om has been with us from the time Goa Chitra is opened. He's the son of our staff, Cyril and Samrita. At the end of today's visit, I'm hoping that the diaspora youth shall gain an understanding not only about their roots, but at some micro level, the transformations that are taking place in contemporary India. To especially do this, we have in our midst dynamic personalities who are in the forefront of such attempts and have willingly come to share their expertise with the diaspora youth in this panel discussion titled Emerging Trends, a forum on the emerging trends of contemporary India. The first speaker for today is Karan Mandral, who is a technology marketing consultant and is now in the third year of a 5-year plan to move into organic farming in Goa. Along with his wife Yogita Mehra, he runs a garden cum eco store near the capital city of Panjim in Talegaon and has completed the first phase of an experiment in commercial growing of organic vegetables. Over the last 2 years, they have been involved in several projects related to agriculture in Goa, including organizing the Konkan Food Festival, training urban gardeners in growing vegetables, helping farmers set up in different parts of Goa and helping educate consumers of health benefits of organic food. In a previous avatar, Karan has also been the editor of Chip and Digits, which is India's leading computing and technology magazine. He continues to write on topics related to technology even today. Karan Mandral will speak on organic farming, a talk on the future of agriculture in India. We welcome you, Karan, and I kindly request Mehta, our staff, to present a floral tribute to Karan and welcome him.
That introduction sounds a bit weird. Yeah, does it make sense to you? Technology, organic farming, sounds like going backwards, right? What do you say? You guys are coming down here and I'm sure you've been connected to different things that have to do with Indian identity, tradition, culture, new things about India. What are the first 5 things that strike you when you think India? A lot of people tell me poor. Does that strike you as a 5 words? Spirituality. Great. Yoga, Ayurveda, that kind of stuff. What else? Sorry? Eat. Oh, heat. Hopefully, they put me up here first. Hopefully, I can prevent it getting to you over the next hour. Okay, heat. What else?
Food culture.
Sorry?
Food culture.
Food culture. I kind of feel every place has it, but fair enough. Sorry? Scenic beauty. Every place has it. No? You don't think so? Okay. You'll buy that one. What else? Just shows all you guys are urban folk. I think one of the biggest, rather one of the most common images that we have associated with India when we look at our movies, other things like that, is I think the farmer. It's a huge part of the cultural identity of the country, has historically always been that way. And except for the last 80 years, it was a very cool thing to be. So I would say that farmer is a huge part of the Indian cultural identity. It's not just the past, it is also true of the present. Even today, about 60 to 70, depending who you ask, of the people in India, almost 1.2 billion people, are involved in farming. So you can't escape the fact that, despite it not being anywhere in Bombay or being anywhere in Delhi or any of the hip cities of the country, that's a huge part of the Indian identity. Okay. So I'll go with another question, and that is, how many of you have an opinion on organic food, or have heard about organic food, or have eaten organic food? Yeah, is it a big deal? In Australia? Yes? Is it available almost anywhere? What about Fiji? Is there? Yeah? South Africa? Yeah? Is it a big deal? So, does anybody have an opinion on it? Is it anybody better than any other food that you eat? Do a lot of people talk about it? Do you read a lot about it nowadays? Does that happen? Yeah? Okay, fair enough. So, we hear a lot. We think some of us have opinions about it. Some of us feel, what's the big deal? There's no big deal. It's the same as any other food. And all of those are valid arguments, depending on our perspective. But let's try and look at what organic food really is. And I'm going to hopefully try and show you how this connects back to our agricultural traditions in India and why it's important. Right? So it's basically a production system in which you look at the soil health, the ecosystem health, and you don't impact of any of that when you are farming. I'm just trying to condense it down. It means that when you're growing something, you don't use the most typically used pesticides and synthetically created fertilizers to grow what you're growing. The logic is very simple. They say if you use natural substances, you are likely to not have unhealthy side effects as a result of eating the food. Now it's widely believed, though not conclusively proven, that chemical fertilizers and pesticides are responsible for a lot of the ailments that we face nowadays. Right? There's a lot of evidence for it, there's a lot of arguments against it. Right? So I'll try and kind of take you through some of these so that hopefully at the end of it you can also form some kind of opinion for yourself. The first thing is that traditional organic agriculture was practiced in India and especially in Goa till almost the mid of the 1960s. It is only after the 1960s onwards that we started seeing urea, which is a petroleum-based fertilizer, and other kinds of pesticides become popular in farming. The second part of it is that's interesting is there's a large parts of Goa, say the cashew orchards, the mango orchards, and even a lot of the paddy, which actually grows without any other external unnatural fertilizers. Right? So it's actually present here. It's not a novelty like it may be in Fiji, where maybe 2% of the farming is actually organic and so on. Now there are certain problems that agriculture in India faces. The conventional school of agriculture. In India we had something called the Green Revolution. It was not only in India, it happened many other places. But what basically happened was that there was a new scientific argument that if you use NPK based fertilizers, plants responded very well, productivity improved, and you could feed people much more efficiently. This efficiency argument is something that has kind of taken place over the last 30, 35, 40 years in many countries. And we are now beginning to see that there are several downsides to it. Now, the first thing is that the use of these fertilizers, which somebody has to go out and purchase, right, is becoming very expensive and it's creating debt. Okay? So one of the biggest things that we see in India over the last 10, 12 years or so, they say almost 250,000 people committed suicide due to farm debt. Okay, so this is one problem that we are seeing, or side effect we are seeing as a result of use of external inputs or external fertilizers and pesticides. They are expensive, people can't afford them. If they spend it, they are exposed to risk. If their crop fails, they end up with debt. When the debt mounts, they commit suicide. Okay, so this is a big thing that is being discussed over here in India, and it's a great worry right across. The second thing is that we are finding that it depletes water very fast. If you were to look at a map of the globe, there are several areas which are projected to have extreme water, acute water shortages over the next 15 years, between now and 2030 about. India's red, which is extremely high on those risk areas. The area of Punjab, which is supposed to be the most fertile part of our country, is already running extremely low. There is a lot of salinization of soil as the use of fertilizer, and a lot of residue of pesticides in the water, which is coming out, as we heard from studies, in breast milk in mothers or in other ways, right? So that is another system that is bothering us from the conventional systems. The third is this drop in fertility of land. So what we saw was increase in productivity for over 20 years, and then it started declining sharply because you need to put in more and more fertilizer to get the same kind of results, right? So it's no longer giving you the benefits you want. This is a huge concern that India faces, and it's really important because India's fertilizer subsidy, if I remember correctly, is something in the region of 130 or 150,000 crores. That's 150,000 crores. I'm not sure how much it translates in dollars, but it's a hell of a lot of money. So it's costing us more and more to continue to subsidize this kind of fertilizer. The petroleum prices are headed one way. Have you had an increase in fuel prices in your countries? Yeah, over the last 2 years or 3 years? In our country, if I'm not mistaken, we had roughly speaking between a 15 to 20% price increase in the price of petrol or diesel, despite the fact that it's heavily subsidized. So it's just not sustainable for us. And our country, even now, our economy is being kind of downgraded because they're finding that we don't know how we're going to pay for that subsidy. Right? So if you're going to have petrol prices going up, subsidies going up, you're just not going to be able to afford to run your budget. So that's a big problem that we are looking at over the next 5-10 years for India. And then there is an interest. As you said, most of you have heard about agriculture that is organic. If I had asked this question 15 years ago, most people in India would have said, all of it's organic, or they would have said that, what's the big deal? It doesn't matter. But today, in more mature markets, maybe even in your markets, not just in Europe and the UK, there is a huge opportunity. People are very aware of the benefits, or actually they believe in the benefits, and they buy a lot of organic food. And that's a great opportunity for a farm kind of system like we have, right? Now, how many of you have heard arguments against organic food? Why it's not good? There's a lot of people who don't believe organic food makes sense. Can you